This is Dr. Warren Vanderhill talking to Dr. Connie Hirsh, Muncie Jewish Oral History Project 2. It's February 21, 2003. Connie, I want to begin by thanking you for agreeing to participate in the study. And as with all the participants, I've asked them a question that's kind of a general Muncie question. And I'd like you to begin by commenting a little bit on why you came to Muncie and if you and or your husband might have had other options when you elected to come here.
Well, we came to Muncie because of my husband's job, like many people who end up away from family. Surprisingly enough, as a physician, he didn't have many options. At the time we came was about 8.5 years ago, in the summer of 1994. There wasn't a lot of jobs. Managed care was threatening to come full force, and so he wanted a multi-subspecialty practice in ophthalmology, and the choices were here at the Eye Center in Marion, and Danville, Virginia, South Central Virginia.
Okay. As far as your specialty, you could have
I could go anywhere.
Okay.
I can go anywhere.
Okay. What did you think of the community when you first came?
I met Tali and
Okay.
Alex right away.
Okay.
I think that made a big difference for us because they're a physician couple and they have 2 children that are close in age to my children, and she was very determined that her children will grow up Jewish and marry Jewish people as my husband and I are. So having that immediate connection bonded us, and the kids got along well.
Okay.
Our girls were 4 at the time.
Okay.
And as far as the rest of the community, they were quite welcoming. I think we got invited to 1 or 2 people's homes pretty quickly. Certainly when we were in the congregation, people came over to you and wanted to know who you are and what are you doing here.
Has your opinion changed since you've been here for 8 years? Of Muncie in general? I'll ask you later about the congregation, but I'm talking really more about your view of the larger Muncie community, and not so specifically at this juncture about Temple Bethel or the congregation.
Well, when we first came here, I really didn't know what to expect.
Okay.
I told you before, I thought we were
right.
in the Midwest when we lived in Detroit, but we didn't know we weren't really in the Midwest till we got here. It was quite different from Detroit.
Okay.
But I did find that people were rather friendly. It's much easier to meet people, just strike up a casual conversation, which you didn't really find in the East where I'm from or in Detroit.
Okay.
And I don't think my opinion really has changed.
Okay. Where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey.
Okay, where?
New Jersey Shore, Long Branch.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a big difference. But, again, going from there and ultimately being in Detroit and coming down here, that's a pretty big contrast between places like that. What part does being a member of the local Jewish community, specifically Temple Bethel, play in your life today? How important is it to you?
It's a very important part of my life. I think I'm not going as much as I did the first few years, partly because of my work hours and I'm more tired.
Yeah.
But it's part of being Jewish, feeling connected to a community, to the Jewish community at large in the world. It makes me feel like I'm connected to people, and there is a sense of people caring.
Okay. How would you describe your life as a member of a Jewish community, and it could be really different communities? You could talk a bit about the New Jersey community, about Detroit. But what was your life like as part of those Jewish communities before you came to Muncie?
Well, growing up, I went to an Orthodox yeshiva,
Okay.
and so that was a very small school. There were 6 to 10 kids in my class, and so you were part of the school community. The people were spread out among a variety of synagogues in the area. And then we went to college and medical school, and in those I wasn't really taking part in any community I was living in at the time. And it was when we were in residency, we also were too busy to be part of a Jewish community. It was only when I was done with residency that when we went to Detroit that we joined a synagogue. And we were part of a very huge synagogue, 1,200 families. And
This Reform or conservative?
This was conservative. And you could go into that congregation and not know a soul. And so as part of that congregation, we joined a chavurah, which was, I think, maybe 8 couples. I don't know.
You have to spell that.
7. Chavurah is
Yeah.
CHAVURAH. It means friend. It's from the root word friendship. It means fellowship.
Okay.
And I think there were 7 or 8 couples in the group, and they were all younger than us, but they were all recently married, just starting out, and we all started to have kids around the same time. And we did Jewish things together, celebrated holidays together. So they became kind of a small, extended family. Some of them were transplants. My telephone. Chavurahs celebrated birthdays together for the kids, birthday parties. We did some holidays together. Didn't do it. Some Chavurot do study sessions in Torah study, but
Okay.
we really didn't do that.
How large was this congregation in numbers?
1,200.
1,200?
1,200 families.
1,200 families.
And there was one even bigger in Detroit. There was an 1,800 family congregation. If we had stayed in Detroit, I would have switched to a different congregation. The younger rabbi left and to head a small congregation, and I had talked to my husband about switching to that one.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty big. You don't get much sense of self if you're in something that large.
But something that large has a lot more classes and activities. There's always something going on. And actually, there's often a small group that go to the services on a regular basis. And if you go, it's not that hard to get involved and get on various committees and get to know people. But
do you recall offhand, this is my preacher-kid background here, how large the rabbinical staff was?
There were two rabbis.
Okay. Full-time cantorial staff?
One.
Religious school?
That I don't know, since my kids were young.
Okay. In the first study that I did of the Muncie Jewish community, I asked each of the participants, now 23 years ago, to comment on relationships in Muncie between Jewish members of the community and non-Jewish members of the community. And of course, 23 years ago, there were still lots of memories of some major issues regarding housing covenants and clubs that people could not join, etc. I decided to ask the question again in this study, just to see if you feel that those issues are still important in Muncie, relationships between Jewish members of the larger Muncie community and people who are not Jewish.
I think most of the time it's fine.
Okay.
I think for me it's sometimes odd, or I found it odd coming here, that people don't know that the synagogue exists still.
Okay.
That I found odd. You know, here it is on a main street that people not only have never met anybody Jewish and don't even know that the synagogue exists.
Okay.
I think most places, you know, people are pretty accepting and welcoming and interested to hear about our culture, community, our religion.
Right.
But the ignorance I found absolutely mind-boggling. And even now, you know, every once in a while I'll still get questions. You mean, even though they know I'm Jewish, you mean you don't worship Jesus?
Okay.
So in the places I've lived in Detroit and in New Jersey, I had never come across that. So that is strange. Even a couple weeks ago, we had a bad experience at my son's Cub Scout meeting, where the woman got up, you know, apparently was on the fly. She was asked to give a closing prayer, and she did this prayer in Jesus' name. And my husband was really infuriated, and we walked out. It was the end, but we left before the dinner. My son didn't understand it, and eventually got an apology from the Cub Master. But the woman who herself wrote a note and said she teaches tolerance to her children, but she didn't understand why we felt this was inappropriate at a Cub Scout meeting. Cub Scouts are very welcoming to all religions.
Yeah, right.
But so sometimes it's ignorance, I think, more that still sometimes is mind-boggling to me.
Well, that leads to the second part of the question, and that is if in your life, whether it's here or anyplace else, you've experienced any overt or covert anti-Semitism.
As a child, I mean, as a teenager in high school, as a child, I'd been in a very sheltered environment, really didn't know very many non-Jews.
Mm-hmm.
But in high school, I remember being hearing about Jew Bagel Street in Elbron, which was the richer part of town that had a lot of Jews. I remember after I came back from Israel, and I was really gung-ho Israel, and thinking about moving to Israel at that point, idealistic teenager.
Sure.
And I remember a friend dropped me. The friend's father had voted for George Wallace, and I didn't see her anymore after that.
Understandably. How do you see the future of Temple Bethel?
I think as long as Ball State's here and the hospital stays good, there'll still be doctors and professors that'll come to keep the congregation going. I think Ann and John's generous contribution of having that beautiful social hall and the activities that are done in the social hall, I think attracts people who are committed Jews potentially to come to this community. So I think that is good for the community in the future, because a lot of Jewish communities of this size are dying. And I think the congregation has changed a lot with the degree of converts that are coming into, and the mixed marriages. I mean, I think that's happening everywhere, but certainly they're now being allowed to be part of the board and be members, even when they're not Jewish yet.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about that, because this is an interesting side topic that probably somebody in women's studies ought to work on over at the university. One of the things that's really struck me now that I'm almost at the end of the two dozen interviews that I'm planning to do for this project is the very important role of non-Jewish spouses in the life of Temple Bethel today. 23 years ago, the only person whom I could really put in that category was Beulah Lazar. And of course, she had been there for quite a long time and actually had as much of a foot in the First Presbyterian Church as she indeed does then and now at Temple Bethel. So I just want to get you to comment on it. I mean, that's changed significantly in 23 years. So you now have people who are in this category of non-Jewish spouses who play a very important role. And I just want to get you to tell me if you think that's appropriate.
I think it's appropriate as they're part of a Jewish family. They want to raise their children Jewish to really participate in a lot of ways in the temple. I think most of them shy away from actually getting on the bima and holding the Torah and doing that. Most of them, I don't know of any that really feel comfortable doing those ritual roles. But when we several years ago tried to define that, there were people who really got their back up and got insulted.
Okay.
That people should be equal, totally equal.
Right.
But they're not totally equal from a religious point of view.
Right.
And so it created a lot of tension, which you must have heard about from
sure.
a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think now nobody wants to insult anybody, and so everybody just shies away from talking about it. But I think there's also, it's not just the non-Jewish spouse, it's the non-Jewish people who are converting that aren't Jewish yet, that are being allowed to be members, that I have a bit of a problem with.
Okay.
You know, it's not that they're married to somebody Jewish and they're a Jewish family.
Right.
In some regards. These are people that are saying they're going to convert, and before they're even converted, they're allowed to be full members.
Yeah.
That just strikes me as strange. And I do have a problem with having non-Jews be on the board. I know that was voted in.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have voted for it if I was on the board.
Well, you know, to carry that just one step beyond this, obviously you would probably be aware that during the course of doing all these interviews, I've picked up some concern that a few people have about the, I'd say, reintroduction of more Hebrew in the service, about going more from the Reformed tradition to a conservative tradition. I just wonder how that strikes you.
I'm coming from an Orthodox conservative tradition, so to me it's very little Hebrew.
Okay.
As far as I understand it, the Reform movement is going towards the conservative, and conservative is going towards Reform.
Yeah.
And so I think the national trend is to use more Hebrew in the service, and to go back to wearing a yarmulke and a tallis, and even to observe some form of kashrut, which 100 years ago Reform had totally done away with that and criticized it.
Yeah, very definitely criticized.
But I think as long as there's transliteration, as long as there's most of the songs that are sung in Hebrew, and even the prayers, there are places in the prayer book where you can find the transliteration, and so I think they need to be more diligent about saying, this is the page it's on, so that people can follow that.
True.
And there's a lot of English.
Yeah. You mentioned a few moments ago the importance of the building addition to the temple, and I'd like you to comment a bit more on that, because a lot of people have said that has made a really significant difference on the life of the congregation, not only in its religious life, but also as a cultural center, as a community center. I would like to get your comments on that.
Have you seen the room?
Oh, sure.
And it's magnificent.
Yeah,
It's beautifully done.
It is. It's incredible.
And it's so much nicer to have a party up there than if you go down to the basement, where there's little teeny windows that are up high. It's just a much more pleasant atmosphere, so I think people like to sit somewhere and be somewhere where there's this beautiful room. It really does make a difference.
Okay. I've asked everybody to give me a wish list, and if there were to be a Connie Hirsh wish list that might help to ensure the future of the temple and the congregation, what might you put on the list? I'll give you a prompt and tell you what comes in here all the time. Okay, what comes in here all the time, I'd say 90% of the study thus far, and it came up 23 years ago, is the matter of having a full-time rabbi.
Definitely, I think that would be, if we had, and we need more money. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to for everything.
All right.
We need more money.
Right. But what would a full-time rabbi add to the congregation's life that it doesn't have right now, in your opinion?
Right now with students, we're telling them what to do. There's nobody really to look to for religious guidance. Having some continuity with the students. They're young. They're kids. I mean, it's like taking care of the babysitters. I've had college-age babysitters that I've had living with me that they need another parent.
Well, let me tell you, in your presence, I'm reacting this way because a lot of the responses have to do. Here you are, a psychiatrist, And a lot of the comment I get on this is, I can't go to somebody like a student rabbi with a major problem in my life. If this is a problem that I want to discuss with somebody who is a full-time rabbi, somebody who has some wisdom, who's been around, and I just wonder, given your professional life, if you see that as something that's an important dimension for a full-time rabbi.
Definitely.
Okay.
And there are people that have gone to the student rabbis, but they're lost, and some of them come to me to ask me what to do.
Yeah. Well, these people will, without mentioning names, they'll mention specific problems that have come up in their lives, and they'll say, come on, Warren, I'm not going to go and talk to a kid about a problem like that. And I can understand that. And so they see someone who has been around, if you will, and might have had more experience with some of these things, being able to counsel them more than somebody who's driving up here a couple times a month from the Hebrew Union and working on his or her own degree. Yeah, but it is a problem.
It's nice to be able to have a long-term relationship with a clergy person, just the way it's nice that you have a long-term relationship with your physician and somebody who gets to know you over a long period of time.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. My last question is this working hypothesis that I mentioned briefly before we began the interview, and that is that I'm playing with this notion that had it not been for the hospital as an importer of talent, and the university as an importer of talent, that in the past couple of decades there might not have been much of a future for Temple Bethel. I just wonder how that hypothesis strikes you.
I think it's totally accurate.
Okay.
I don't see us having come here just to pick a place out of the hat.
Okay.
I would have rather been in the city anyway, but truthfully,
Yeah.
when we first came here, I wasn't sure if this congregation was going to be enough, and we thought about taking the kids to religious school in Indianapolis. And when I tried out the different congregation, after being here for a couple of years, the congregation that I liked the best was the small conservative synagogue, not the large one.
Really?
Was the small one, because you can go there and people will also
Yeah.
come over to you and introduce themselves. And
So
there's a sense of-
not Bethel Zedek, but the other one.
It's actually Shari Tefillah.
Oh, okay.
It's a little the more religious conservative synagogue,
Oh, okay.
and we've gone there quite a few times.
Okay. Well, those are the only questions I have, so I want to give you the opportunity to add any comments or perspectives that you might like to tell me about regarding just kind of an overview of your feelings about the congregation and what you think might be the future of it, the immediate future of it. And I've asked you a question about the long-term future of it, but I'm talking about the now. I mean, how you see this playing out over the next couple of years as far as your own involvement.
For me, the temple has been really important. I think the sense of a community, by there being this small community, is really a center part of my life in a lot of ways. I don't go as much as I was before I was helping Tali run the religious school, and
Right.
we both pulled back from that role.
Yeah.
And I don't really feel like I have the organizational ability right now and the time to devote to it, but I can't say that's been really hard for me to be on the sidelines, because I want it to be this way and that way and have more control over it than I do. But Judaism is a central part of my life in general, and with the kids. The biggest problem that I have with the synagogue is there are not really other families other than Tali that have two Jewish parents where they're doing Jewish things at home, and that has been difficult. We're the only family, and Tali sometimes that's had a sukkah, so the Sukkot parties at our house. We tried to convince a couple of other families to do that, and nobody else does that, and it's my favorite holiday. So that part's tough, but at the same time, I don't think I would choose to go somewhere else. We like it here, like the community, like the temple. There's just some great people there.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you very much. I appreciate your taking the time to participate in my study.
You're welcome.